Hello, everyone. Hi, Carrie. How are you doing?
I am excellent. How are you doing, Mark?
Good. Great to see you and Jim and everyone who is here on our Zoom.
Yes, thanks everybody for joining us. Just want a quick introduction. This is Jim Mitty, who's president of Turtlehut Internet Marketing, and Mark Friedler, president and founder of Gigex. And we're here today to talk about strategies for centralizing operations and marketing for franchises, specifically, and ways to improve your profitability as a franchise. So, just by way of introduction, Mark, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in franchising in particular and what you're looking to bring to the industry?
Sure. Well, my first business actually was a franchise. I started a chain of cookie stores many years ago and built a franchise system from the ground up. So I have an understanding of all the kind of bells and whistles needed to do that. Subsequently, I got into the technology world. I've been a startup founder of a couple of companies, and I realized as we grew that a lot of companies have challenges about so many choices in the marketplace. What technologies do they use to make their business work better? So about 5 years ago, I started a consultancy with a bunch of other C-level people like myself that consult for free with larger companies and help them save time, money, and stress on making the selections to run stuff better in their business. So I'm passionate about that. I love helping people be more efficient, and we're honored to serve.
Awesome. And I can certainly say that in our modern society and modern business world, the technology is getting infinitely more complicated. And this is a huge issue that franchises have to address is how to make all these elements of technology fit together. Jim, why don't you speak a little bit and from your perspective, how that affects marketing in particular?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll probably start with your first question, just a little background. Hi, Jim Mitty, president of Turtlehut Internet Marketing. I've been doing internet marketing probably since the internet almost existed. So we started Turtlehut as a web hosting company back in 1999. But ironically, in doing internet marketing right out of college, I was working for a small local advertising firm. And I took my last $2 with a couple friends and decided to invest in some pizza franchises in addition to doing internet marketing. Unfortunately, this is how we got in the franchise space, and long story short, but unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of support from corporate, and they were existing locations. There's probably some issues with them, but long story short, I kind of consider them my MBA. Didn't work out so well. So fast forward to about 13 years ago, a local franchisor with about 35 locations walked into our office and said, "We need some help. We have these locations that kind of all have these rogue websites. Our FDD at the time didn't require it to be managed under our system, so we didn't have a lot of control. And we're really hoping to get all of that in line so we have the right branding and messaging and pricing on these websites. And to make things a little bit more complicated, since they didn't have control, they said, we can't force them to work with you. So you have to produce something that works so well that they want to, which is when we designed the first version. I'm now on version 3, but of our franchise marketing website marketing system that is specifically designed to locally grow and scale for local sites, as we like to call them, for each one of the Z's. And so that's really kind of how we got into this space. And like I said, we're on version 3 of it now.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Mark, when you come in to work with these franchise organizations, what are some of the common issues that you see these organizations are dealing with in terms of streamlining technology, visibility, along those lines with their various aspects of tech?
I think I'd say number one, a lot of businesses in general, especially multi-location, are used to doing things the way they've always done things. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that per se, but the technology world is really progressing so quickly. And we have a large client, a large automotive group franchises, and I was talking with the CTO, and he said, "Oh, we're not a technology company. We just, we're just an automotive company. And I said, well, I actually just made a decision to go get my tires at a tire company, which I think is pretty commoditized, because this particular company allows me to book a time online at any of their stores. And so I can go to the website. I don't care if these are franchise or company owned, but to me, it appears like a seamless sort of thing. So I think companies have to think like, the customer is demanding ease of use of all aspects of their business, be it a
Yep.
consistent website experience, be it calling on the phone and having it work. So I think the one things that companies don't really understand is how um, how expensive technology is when you're not doing it correctly. So I'll give you just a quick example with this 1,000 location franchises. Each store had booked their own phone and internet with a different provider, and now the operation had grown so much. Centrally, finance had no idea you know what was going on, how much they were spending. They weren't able to send out repairs. It was just a mess. So we helped them put that all under one roof. Finance had a website they could go to turn up any new store to request service. And that's just made life, number one, a lot easier. It saved them about 40 hours a month in administration, and it saved them 30% in costs. So these are the type of things that most companies are like, I'm busy running my franchise that does X, Y, or Z, and they don't think about the plumbing in the background. But there are a lot of efficiencies they can get.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because franchising is about taking a business model that worked for one and then rolling that out to multiple locations. And sometimes, an organization will take what they're doing and just duplicate, but it doesn't necessarily work at scale. And so, you know, Jim, talk a little bit about that from a marketing perspective, because I see this transition where, okay, they just kind of keep using the same systems, and then at some point those systems break because they don't scale well. So coming in from a marketing perspective, when is a good time for franchises to start thinking about that? What should they be thinking about? What questions should they be asking about their systems as they're transitioning from, a few corporate locations to an emerging franchise?
Sure. And I think, just like you touched on and Mark touched on, I mean, in theory, the whole point of a franchise system or buying into it should be the economy of scale. I mean, if you were to go start your own business and pay for your own brand and try to get brand recognition and then figure out how to hire and how to do this next piece and how to buy equipment, where I'm going to get my supplies from, and all of those other components, every aspect it should be a value proposition for everybody involved, right? The rising tides rise all ships type of concept. And certainly there should be a lot of that from a marketing perspective. Unfortunately, I do think it's one of the areas, no different than Mark was alluding to some other technologies, where the franchisors are not necessarily positioning themselves to take advantage of that economy of scale. Whether it's working with preferred vendors with very specific fee structures that are already baked in. But I certainly know that from our perspective, whether it's our system to build a website and make it so we can very, very cost effectively roll out local sites as they grow and expand, all the way to just the knowledge base we get when working in advertising, for example, or even making creative, right? We can make creative, and if I was doing that for one location, one place, obviously that same creative, that same graphic, that same video can be rolled out and used in 250 locations. And so the ability to save value and really capitalize on the economy of scale, I think is paramount to franchisees and franchisor success.
Yeah, so scalability is certainly a huge factor in thinking about technology. Mark, talk a little bit about visibility, because I know a lot of the systems that you implement bring a level of visibility that maybe previous products that the systems we're using were not delivering on that visibility. Talk a little bit about that and how you guide franchises in that process of developing that visibility.
Sure. I mean, I'd like to follow on what Jim was saying, that what we're really talking about is today we are in the attention economy. And that means, you have mind share that is derived from people experiencing your brand by walking in, by TikTok, by Instagram, by Facebook, by your website. All these things are related. And, it's all about what is called CX, customer experience. And today, if someone doesn't have a good customer experience, where do they go? They'll go to X, or they'll go to Insta, and they'll, flame the company like, oh, I was on hold for forever, or like, so and so gave me my meal and it was cold, right? There's really no um, acceptance for mediocrity from customers out there, right?
Right.
As there shouldn't be. So, for
Or
example,
it gets out there to everybody instead of remaining local like it used to, because it goes beyond just a little post to like going viral on a nationwide social media, which
exactly.
whole
So,
other.
for example, we're dealing with a franchise that taught classes, and right before the classes, people were coming in to get in the class. And at the same time, customers were calling up, can I get into the class? Is there room? And across the franchise, they had a chronic problem of not answering the phone. So, they had a decent phone system, but we showed them, we're like, you could bring in a phone system that has AI built into it. So an agent can speak with somebody intelligently and let them know, is there room in the class? Can they book? We also added a call center where centrally people could call in and be served, and people could now send a text or send a WhatsApp or a Facebook message and communicate with them in what's called an omni-channel way. So those are the sorts of things that customers expect, and a lot of businesses haven't really thought about. So to Jim's point of like, yeah, you can go roll your own, but that's kind of not the point of a franchise, right? The franchise is there to make the operator's life easier and the customer's life more consistent. So I see that as our job is showing franchise operators and franchisees kind of the art of the possible and how to do that kind of quickly without reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have anything to add to that, Jim?
No, I think Mark articulated really well. I mean, the whole point is of the system is to live within the system, but have the system be as good as possible, right? I think in business, just across the board, businesses as they grow get stuck in paradigms. And when you get stuck in those paradigms, the way we always did it, well, with things like technology, like we're talking about today, technology is rapidly evolving. So if you're not trying, keeping up, if not even being, accelerating how fast you're implementing things, you have the ability to get run over. So you really have to, watch those paradigms, do what works, but continually test, evolve, and look for better ways.
Like another kind of weird example, and I'm sure Jim deals with this all the time, but there are lawyers that are going around and filing lawsuits against franchises because their websites are not ADA compliant, right? Meaning that, the font isn't, disabled people for whatever reason are not able to access the website according to certain regulations. And there are clear regulations about that, but a lot of companies like don't know what they don't know. And we had a conversation with a kind of large company that had this challenge, and they had a lawyer kind of, knocking on their door, threatening to sue them. And this is something that's pretty straightforward. I'm sure, Jim, you all take care of that, so that's never an issue.
Yeah, no, we certainly, but yes, we've had many people approach us with that same problem. I mean, obviously, the larger the franchise group, the larger the system, the bigger target they have in terms of things like lawsuits, because they're thought of as having big dollars, whether it's true or not. And the more you need to protect yourself and make sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's and doing it the right way.
Yeah, and then another thing which I think is really, obvious in this modern connected age is, who owns the customer? Is it the franchise, or with the franchisee, or is it shared customer information? Like that's important. And it's especially important now when you have an epidemic of internet security breaches. I mean, I don't know about you, but in the last few months, I received, a letter from Ticketmaster, a letter from United Health, a letter from, I can't rattle off the numbers, but like, oh, hey, you're part of a data breach and all your information has been stolen. CVS, right? And it's maddening, but every time that happens, um, you know, how do customers look at that company for not taking care? I mean, they violated the law, your data's been stolen. And if you're a brand and you have that, OMG moment where you're like, oh, now we have to disclose that all our customer data has been stolen. What does that do to trust? What does that do to, your customers willing to work with you? So, like, there's an example that franchises haven't really thought about data security, but now there's you can deploy basically a SaaS system that protects all your data inside the franchisees and the franchisors, and not if, but when there's a breach. Because just like Jim said, lawyers coming after big targets, hackers are going after, medium-sized to large targets. So, you have to be protected. When back in the day, no one wore seatbelts. Now, you have to wear seatbelts, right? And it's the same sort of thing. So that may not be an obvious thing, but you know, uh, an ounce of prevention is definitely a pound of a cure. And then another thing as well is all companies have to have corporate liability insurance. And now insurance companies are requiring, do you have 24/7, protection against data hacks? What is your data security plan? What is your backup plan? And if you're a pizza franchise, you probably haven't thought about that because you think other things are more important, but these are actually core to your business.
Mm,
So those are the type of things that we help companies get their heads around, come up with a plan, and come up with a reasonable, inexpensive solution to mitigate those threats so they don't come and wreak havoc in the business.
sure. I'm going to go back to something you said, Mark, to just kind of continue this down a little bit more pointed direction. You said, you don't know what you don't know. So if someone were to come to you and say, I have this great business, I have 4 corporate locations, I want to franchise this business, in line of what, you don't know what you don't know, what would you advise them to put into place in those early stages? And Jim, why don't we start with you from a marketing perspective, and then Mark from a tech perspective? Like, what would you say if you're helping this franchise build their business in a box? What are the critical elements in your jurisdiction?
Going to say, obviously, I'm going to focus on marketing because that's what we do. But I have this belief that a lot of problems can be solved with revenue and sales. So maybe you can't completely grow your way out of it, but it's certainly a lot easier when your frustration is, how do I service as many clients as I possibly can, as opposed to where do I find clients? So from that perspective, I'm going to, without a doubt, say marketing. And I think the biggest challenge we've experienced and see over and over again is an FDD and a structure that did not fully embrace the marketing, the brand fund, a lot of systems call it, but the marketing dollars collected from each franchisee that are going to be reallocated based on corporate. So, we talk to franchise systems where, they don't have any dollars to put towards an actual website because it was just kind of there and they didn't plan for it, or they didn't have dollars allocated toward who's going to manage social media or come up with assets or things along these lines. So they talk with us, they love what we can do, they can't wait to implement it, and they have no way to fund the implementation because they were not properly setting up the FDD and the fee structures to accommodate some of those things. And so I see that all the time. The best FDDs that I'm seeing now are doing a good job of allocating a range of potential marketing dollar spend, whether in a minimum as well, in terms of maybe it's $250 a month or up to 2 or 3% or whatever that would be on the system. And then the same, going down Mark's path, a technology fee. Because a lot of these, when they start out, they're like, oh, we'll just use emails provided by Google and only costs us, $5 an email address, and that's great. And then all of a sudden they don't realize that that franchisee wants each one of their team leaders and their managers to have email. And now they're spending $150 a month on email system alone per location, and they have no way to compensate that. And they can't tell them we don't want you to have something as simple as email, but they never baked into the FTD a technology fee. And so I guess the best advice, and I probably haven't read as many FDDs as some people out there, but it would be to really look at a good offering of FDDs and see how they break out these structures and give yourself flexibility to grow into the systems that you're going to need to grow into. Because if you don't, you're handcuffing yourself, and then how are you going to get to that next level?
Yeah, I definitely, when you attend franchise conferences and you hear these speakers at IFA and places like Springboard, a lot of them are talking about the fee structures within the FDDs because everything is so much more technologically advanced. You have so many more systems that need to be integrated, and franchisors are often caught on the backside of knowing, how their different elements of tech integrate and then being able to fund those. So, like definitely addressing the technology fund and the marketing fund, and the staffing of having the people, even if it's a fractional CTO that's going to help you figure out how to integrate all those things. And you have, like that's essentially what you're doing, Mark. You're coming in and you're saying, okay, let's look how all these systems integrate. So Mark, how about from your perspective, what would you say, like, here, you need to think about these things?
Well, yeah, I think, there's an interesting case going on in San Francisco where there's a luxury high rise, was one of the most expensive condo buildings in the city, and they screwed up. They didn't make the foundation strong enough, so the building is now tilting. And, famous people like Joe Montana have had condos there, and all these people are losing their shirts because the values of the condos have dropped because they didn't build the foundation properly. So, I mean, that's a metaphor um, for the franchisor, right? Your job is to build that foundation. And I would also challenge a franchisor to think about this a little differently. Like, we're working with a large franchise group where they are procuring a technology package, and they have a show once a year for their franchisors or franchisees, and they show them all the stuff that they're doing for them, and they have a bundled franchise package where they're like, hey, you're going to get phone, internet, security, all these different elements in a box, store in a box, and you can buy it from us, and we've negotiated a discount, so it's going to be less expensive for you to buy it from us than it would be to go out and piece that together. So in that particular case, there's some margin for the franchisor. They're making a few points by providing that, and we help them put that offering together. So it's not necessarily a fee, but they're enabling, the franchisee to have that. But, back to your point, Jim, I think it has to be that the franchisor thinks about it, and it has to be part of their agreement that, you know what, in the same way you have to buy the ingredients for your pizza from us, or you have to buy your tires from us. I think franchisors should be like, hey, you need to get your technology from us, and we've thought it through, and part of the value we're bringing is we're helping you so you don't have to think about this, and then you can deploy it at scale. So how that gets done, if that's through a technology fee or if that's just kind of like, hey, we're giving you a discount, but you're obligated to go buy those things from us, I think makes sense. And then, the other question, as I mentioned before, is, what level of oversight does the franchisor have? Like, we have a client where there's a franchisee that owns over 100 units, and they're pretty large. So the question is, does the franchisor also have visibility into what they're doing, or is the franchisee on an island themselves? So that kind of, thinking about, Yeah, the franchisor can contract, but we also have the rights to come in and look at what's going on and audit that. I think that's an important thing to think about. And especially like from a website perspective, right? You don't want everyone just doing their own thing. And as I said, as these systems grow, the problems of not having stuff coordinated, just kind of multiplies. So again, save time, money, and stress. Think about that foundation as you're growing. It's easier to come in and figure that out when you have a handful of units versus to do a transformation as we've done, with those that have thousands. It's doable, but when you think about technology as being part of your offering, every business, and I think this is really important, every business needs to think of themselves as a technology business. There's a technology layer that is absolutely essential to you running your business. I mean, think about it. You walk into, a sandwich shop. I was just in Jersey Mike's the other day, and I want to buy a sandwich. What happens if their POS is down? Can't buy a sandwich. Well,
Right.
the POS is down if the internet is down. So I was just speaking with a client yesterday, and they're a growing chain of insurance companies. And I said, "Do you have backup internet?" And they said, "No." I said, "Well, what happens when the internet goes down?" "Oh, we just have people call on their cell phones," right? Like that's not acceptable. So now there are a lot of offerings that are store in a box. You have your internet, you have backup internet, you have something called SD-WAN that controls both the connections, you have your phone system. It's literally one place, all in a box. And so every operation has the same level. So you're not going to have someone who's down, because if you're down, you're out of business.
Yeah. And I think, going back to, I guess, as we started with the foundation of growing, the best FDDs I've seen have flexibility built in, because what Mark just talked about, nobody thought about, or wasn't even a system 5 years ago, that I can have backup internet to make sure my point of sale is always connected. And I don't want to dwell on my past of pizza franchise, but at the time we took orders on paper, and there was a lot of cash leaving my business because there were not good systems in place to process those orders. The franchise system, when they built and wrote the FDD, didn't require or even know about a computer system first. Then when the computer system point of sales came out, they weren't required because they weren't baked in the FDD, so they couldn't force anybody. There were 2 or 3 different vendors across some of the more profitable stores had started implementing different computer systems. But because that wasn't baked into the fact that corporate with the 30 locations could have said, no, in our FDD, we have the right, if we find a better system, we're going to roll this out, and there's some flexibility based in that, then we wouldn't have found ourselves, without that system. And then imagine, reporting back to corporate of knowing how many pepperonis we sold versus sausages. And if we're struggling or not, they get better instant results through that point of sale. So you can see there's so much value in any one of these systems that when you build the business today, you don't know, what social media platform is going to be tomorrow, what the cost to implement that is, or what that you're going to take tablets to order for your service business. So when somebody signs the estimate to redo the roof, whatever that is, you didn't know that when you started. And if you don't bring in that flexibility, you're not going to be able to grow and compete with the more agile small businesses. So you have to build that in.
Yeah, one of our guests was just commenting how critical visibility is in these systems. So if you're running, from the marketing perspective, like you're talking about point of sale system and inventory, like you have to be able to optimize those things. And if you're talking about marketing and social media for the franchisor to be able to look and see what's working where and make adjustments, you create so much more margin because you are able to focus in on effectiveness, whether that's, within your sales system or inventory or marketing systems. So that was a great point. I want to end with a couple short questions for each of you. One, I'll kind of roll this into two, and then you can each answer. If you could leave people with one piece of advice, what would that be? And then do you have like a particular resource you recommend for franchisors or just business leaders? That can be something inspirational, or like a favorite quote that you refer to that you want to share with our audience. you want to go first, Jim?
Sure. I think there's probably a lot of Jimisms that float around our office, but a couple of them, I remember the first time I heard it, but I always get stuck in this concept of, well, I think I know how I want to do something, but I'm not exactly sure that exactly how I want to do it. And I get myself caught in a rut. So this concept of, if you make it bad and then make it better, gives me permission to know I'm starting out with a C grade work, but that gives me the ability to edit it. And then the other one I kind of live my life by is, you don't have a problem if you can buy your way out of it. And that doesn't mean you're rich, but it means that the real problems in the world are problems that money just can't solve.
I like that. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, don't be afraid of starting. Is kind of been a motto that I've lived by, and being a startup person, an entrepreneur, and when I look back and I realized the what I didn't know at the different stages of the business. If I'd known that, I never would have gotten off of like square one. So I think that's important for business operators to think about. Okay, how can I take this journey to be better?
Mm-hmm.
And what Jim was talking about with the web presence and marketing, that's not a one and done. That's a process. Same thing too with us, what things should you do in your technology? Like we have a checklist that we share with companies. And number one is like, what are your customers saying? Do you have any pain points right now? Understand that. And then we're like, let's take a look at your bills. What are you paying right now? A lot of companies don't even understand what they're spending money on. So we help them in that process. And then we're like, okay, the job is we're going to be your guide, as C-level people who've been around a while, a bunch of different businesses. We're going to help you think through how to like do things better. And the enemy of the possible is the perfect, right? So people are like, oh, I can't do this unless it's absolutely this way. Well, you don't know what this way is, but you have to start. So I would say, talk to someone who cares about, you know, you and your business. Come to it with the lens of the customer and just try and be better every day. And that's where, companies like Jim's and mine are passionate about, like helping people do what they do and do it better, And so it's good to have someone like that, helping along that journey.
Yeah, it sounds like you both kind of have the some kind of motto that helps us. I think there's always this strive for perfection, and particularly when you're a business owner, the people that decide to franchise are people that are very ambitious and goal oriented and want to get it right. And that can sometimes stop you from getting started and trying. Um, and just piggybacking on what you're saying, Mark, there's so many resources within franchising, and it's, I think, just absolutely critical to take advantage of that. Ask people that are a little bit ahead of you in the journey. I do that as a parent, how do you handle teenagers? So it's, as a business owner looking and a franchise owner at these people that are just a little bit ahead of you in the game, and maybe you can prevent making some of the same mistakes that they made. Talking to people that are experts on technology and experts in marketing and expert in business operations and um, training franchisees and thinking about your customer experience and your franchisee experience. As a franchisor, you kind of have two customers. You have your franchisees and you have your actual customer base, and it's critical to think through all of those things. So there's so many resources within the franchising world. Anything you want to leave your audience with today?
Yeah. I mean, I would say you should seek out someone with the heart of a teacher,
Yep.
someone who is willing to share and someone who's not transactional.
Mhm.
You don't need another salesperson trying to sell you a clump of whatever. Both Jim and I, have been around. We've run businesses, we've operated franchises. Like we know what we're talking about, and we both have, technology background. So, you know, I like I really enjoy engaging with other businesses, that have humility, that realize that there's a path to do better, and that I get a lot of joy out of that. And so I would say that, finding someone, with that sort of attitude versus someone who's just transactional, I think is going to be really helpful to your business.
I guess knowing our audience, I would leave them with the idea of don't forget what the Z's know. As we're talking to franchisors, the Z's are your boots in the ground. The larger your organization gets, the less you're interfacing with customers directly. And so our account management team is conversing with Z's all the time. And it's amazing what they hear that we can then make adjustments from marketing alone of messaging, ideas, promos, because they're on the street and they think about it. So don't, just make sure you keep that door open to those ideas. I mean, sometimes they're a little out there and they may not always work, but listen, because they got some really good ones.
And that goes back to do it bad, do it better, try
Make it
ideas,
bad, make it
try
better.
things out, see what works. Yeah.
Exactly. It was a franchisee that came up with the Big Mac. So there you go.
Yeah. And donut holes.
Oh, I did not know that one.
Yeah. Dunkin' Donuts, the donut
And to
hole.
think all of those years, the holes were just thrown away.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you both of you for your time today. And obviously to our audience, feel free to reach out to either Mark or Jim and get some friendly franchise advice.
Yeah. And Jim, what's the best way to reach you?
Email would be great. Jim@turtlehut.com. Or if you just fill out a form on our website and say something around wanting to talk to me, I'm happy to sit on a chat.
Yeah. And same with me. I'm Mark, MARK, at Gigex, GIGEX.com. So happy to help out. And we're going to be at IFA next week. So if any of you all are around, come on by the booth, and I'm sure there'll be other events that we're at as well. But we're passionate about helping companies do better. So thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.